Hey guys, I'm excited for you to hear today from Shyla Nash. Shyla is a 33-year-old widowed mother making the most of her widow life crisis. She has a background in social work and is currently a full-time mom to her three kiddos, one of who has autism. Shyla is an open book, and today she shares with us her experience in going from diagnosis to loss within a 2-month span of time, living with intense joy and intense grief at the same time, dating post loss, and then dating and widowhood with young kids.
Okay. All right. Well, Shyla, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I know you have a lot of challenges that you've gone through in this grief journey and as you've healed, and you're a little further out now than some of the other folks that people will be hearing maybe before you, but I'm
Yeah.
so glad that you're here. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you. I'm super excited about it and nervous, but it's going to be good.
Oh, you're a natural. I can already tell. So you're going to be good. But well, tell us, everybody's going to want to know a little bit about you and maybe your background and your
Sure.
family. We'd love to hear about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm 33, so pretty young widows club over here. I live in Michigan. I have three kids. Hazel is 6, Hendrix is 3, and Hudson is like 20 months. So super busy. I stay at home now to take care of them and everything, just with the intense changes that came with Jake's death. But prior to that, I was in the social work field for about 10 years. So that's kind of my background professionally. And now I'm home doing the kiddo thing. And we will kind of see where life takes me next. I'm not sure. We're just going to see where it goes once I get a little bit bigger and what it looks like at that point. So yeah, right now I'm just stay at home mom life, busy and everything that comes with that.
I was going to say, you probably have your hands full with three kiddos in those age ranges for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's constant, never ends. I'm sure people can relate to that and how that goes.
Yes. All
Yeah.
right. Well, we would love to hear your story, and I'll let you start where you feel like it's the best place to start, but I will turn it over to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I will just kind of start where Jake and I started. So, yes, my husband, his name was Jake, and we met in 2013 just through some mutual friends and started dating like pretty much right then and just kind of moved pretty quick from there. We had our first daughter, Hazel, in 2016, bought a house, did the whole family thing. And then we actually didn't get married until 2017 because I'm a little bit like, when it comes to marriage, it's not like I like never pushed it. I was cool with being just how we were being. So we actually didn't end up getting officially married till 2017. But looking back, I'm really glad that we did do that, just with everything that happened. So, yeah, we had our second son, Hendrix, in 2019, and we were really just living a very normal, mostly very happy, busy family life with small kids and everything that goes with that, and being tired and grumpy and all that stuff. But honestly, we really did not have any big problems. We lived a very kind of routine, normal life, and that worked really well for us. And everything was good, busy but good. So in spring of 2020, obviously, COVID hit, right? And so we have all of that going on. And Jake started complaining of a lot of neck pain. And he always had neck pain, actually, but could always be like, oh, it's because you're sleeping on the couch with the baby who doesn't sleep, right? So that's why your neck hurts. Like, could always be explained away by something. But of course, it started getting really intense, and he started having a lot of like tingling in his hands and arms and pain, and kind of eventually moved down to his chest. And that was really concerning because no one wants like chest pain and like feeling numb. Like, that's weird. So he tried to get into the doctor, and COVID, right? Let's take this all into consideration, like jump back there a minute. So things that weren't really super essential, and he was young, 33, neck pain. You see, right?
Oh,
You want some pain meds or, whatever that might look like, and just in the culture that we were in at that time. So he did eventually get in for an MRI, and that was June 4. And so we were there. I was able to go along, which is like shocking, right? So right then, and I've had MRIs before for other health issues, and I know that you leave and then the doctor calls you with your results, and they were like, "Why don't you stay here?" I was like,
Oh,
okay. And he didn't, I've never had a medical issue like that. So I kind of started having some anxiety about that at that point. But so, yeah, we were told via phone because of COVID that there was a mass found, a tumor at the very top of his spine, so cervical spine. It was very large, and that we needed to go to a bigger hospital right then. So there we went, and it ended up being diagnosed. He had chordoma, which is really super rare. It's like 1 in a million people get
wow.
this. Just really crazy, really rare. He's probably had it his whole life, actually. They're super slow growing, but until they start causing a lot of issues, typically people don't know. So just kind of fast forward, that was June 4. We had a really big surgery scheduled for the end of June, and that was like 16 hours one day, I think 7 hours the next. So this was a really big surgery with like spinal reconstruction, all of that. And again, it's COVID.
Right.
So only I could be there. And it
Yeah.
just adds another whole loophole.
Yeah. I mean, you've already got life is stressful. There's so many changes that are happening. The way that we live is changing, the way we seek medical care. And
Yeah.
then when you receive the diagnosis and as you're moving through the surgery, did
Mhm.
they give you any indication like, oh, this is something with surgery, we feel like he's going to be fine, or there's a high risk he may not
Yeah.
survive much
Yeah.
longer? What was that like?
Yeah. So the game plan or the thought at that point was we're going to get as much tumor out as we can. We're going to reconstruct that top of the spine there, C1 through 4. And the tumor had like eaten through bone. So it was like going to be metal rods there. So he was going to lose function, a lot of function of his neck. So I think he'd be able to turn it like 10%. So it was going to be a huge lifestyle change. It's a slow growing cancer. It typically doesn't spread to other parts of the body. So the prognosis was pretty good once we got through that surgery. Radiation was next or talked about, to kind of get any spots that were missed. But it was going to be definitely a life-changing, thing for him, especially with the limited mobility. But the thought was it's a slow growing, it doesn't usually spread. We're going to adjust to this new, not being able to turn our neck, but life, can continue on in a new normal. So it wasn't terminal in that sense. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So I'm sure still probably pretty depressing and a lot of anxiety and things going on, but it wasn't really in the back of your mind that you're not going to be able to overcome this.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely a lifestyle change and everything that comes with that. But, life would continue on mostly normal, especially with, young kids. So yeah, that was kind of the hope. So, he came through the surgery really well. He was doing great. He was up and walking around, starting physical therapy, doing really well. Still in the ICU, but doing really good. And he ended up having to get a GI tube placed just because the surgery was through the mouth. So that was hard as far as eating went. And that's kind of when things just went really suddenly downhill. He started saying some things that just didn't make sense, kind of losing touch with reality or kind of random phrases. And, it could kind of be explained because he just was put under again for this GI tube. So, you're kind of loopy when you get out of anesthesia anyway. It's probably that, kind of give it time. And what ended up happening is that same night, I went home and I ended up going back into the ICU that night just because he was not cognitively, mentally, something was off there and some other issues too. So he went back to the ICU that night and then ended up needing to be intubated, and it just went downhill from there. So he ended up getting just a really massive infection, and we tried some really intense like IV antibiotics and several more surgeries to kind of clean up those areas of infection. along the spine and in the brain, but it just got to the point where it was just so spread throughout the entire spinal cord and parts of the brain. And he was losing his, lost function of arms and legs and other things, and just got to the point where we really had to make a decision about, quality of life versus, what that would look like. And going forward. And it was just really intense. It was really intense. So, oh, also, I forgot to mention, right after his surgery, so like early July, I found out I was pregnant. So
Aw.
surprise, surprise.
And
Not
did he get to know that
Yes,
you're
yeah,
pregnant?
yeah. So
Aw.
I was like, do I tell? Do I not tell? Because like stress, right? And I'm like, I can't keep that a secret. I have to tell. And so I did tell him, and I was like, I have to tell you something. And he's like, you're pregnant. And I was like, guessed it right away. So he was super excited about it. And he was like, it'll be fine. This will be fine. We'll be fine. And so like I've always kind of kept that, like, he said it's going to be fine. We'll be fine. But I am really glad looking back that I did tell him, and that we were able to have that conversation, and he did know. So just another, craziness in our story. So
Here
yeah,
you are in the midst of COVID,
yeah,
and then, finding out that your husband has this tumor that has to be removed. You go through these excruciatingly long surgeries. You think
yeah,
everything's going to be fine. Then this
right.
infection starts to spread and he's losing a lot of functionality. How long was he in the hospital where you were kind of on the edge of maybe he's going to recover or maybe he's not? You were just,
Yeah,
I know those days, every day is like torture,
yeah,
that you wait for those daily updates or maybe twice a day updates. It's some days maybe look good and some days you've taken 2 steps back. How long did that happen and what was that like?
yeah. It's definitely a roller coaster of emotion, isn't it? And we can hold on to that, that little bit of good news sometimes, and we just can hold on to that. And it's easy to let little things like that, kind of, when you're looking at the big picture, sometimes it's like, oh, but his blood pressure was super great today, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, he also can't move his legs. So, and he's intubated. He can't speak. He's not conscious. So it definitely was, that roller coaster of up and downs, but he never left the hospital after the surgery. So I think it was like July 8th was maybe when he went back to the ICU. So, and then I made the decision to move him to just comfort care or hospice very end of July, like July 30, I think. So, I definitely feel like we gave it, we gave, the different therapies, antibiotics, time to work and time to see what that looks like. And, we had a lot of different opinions and different surgeries that, to try to clean some of that out. So it really was, he never left the hospital. So really, I would say, July 8 to, the end of the month, a good like maybe 3-4 weeks there, where we
Yeah.
kind of were waiting for things to work and seeing and some of that stuff takes time, neurologically and healing of your body. And, if it wasn't so intense, there was just not one spot where the infection was. It was just everywhere, and so it just makes such a difference. And I'm really lucky that that we were able to have those conversations, and we were pretty open and honest with each other. And I think that's something I really advocate for, all people, couples, partnerships, whatever that looks like, to really talk to your person and make sure what they would like medically, what, funerals, burials, death, cremation, what that all looks like, because it's so important to be on the same page, because when it comes down to it and you're the one signing those consents and that paperwork, to know that you're making the decision that you've talked about together just provides so much relief than guessing about what that may look like, especially when they can't talk to you about it. So I'm really happy we did that. And I always tell everyone to do that, to have those conversations, because you just don't know. And it's really not, if you die, I mean, it's when, It's when. And
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, it's one of those things I think culturally we don't like talking about and we don't want to
definitely.
have to face it.
Yeah.
But in the end, I mean, even if it's just funeral arrangements, there are so many decisions that have to be made. And for the most part, I felt like I knew what my spouse wanted, but there were a couple of things I really got hung up on, like even something like, well, do I bury him with the wedding ring or do I keep the wedding ring? And what would he have wanted? And that was one thing we hadn't really talked about. So you most people as they're grieving go through various phases of guilt and what if I could have done this or what if I could have done that. And so I think you have an excellent point of when you have those conversations up front, you can be confident that you're doing what your spouse wanted and what you believe is the right choice. And after that, we just kind of have to leave it in God's hands that he knows better than maybe any of us what really needs to happen. So
Yeah, definitely. And there are so many of those small choices that you don't even think about until you have to do it. And to have some of those bigger things done is just so helpful when it comes down to it and in that crazy time that we're in. So I definitely agree with that there. So I made that decision to move him to Comfort Care Hospice. And then he did pass away August 4. So we had the diagnosis June 4. So we had exactly 2 months from diagnosis to death. So it was just really traumatic. And, that could be its own podcast. Like we could spend a whole episode just on that. So I don't want to feel like I'm skipping over things, but just trying to keep it short and kind of focused. But just a crazy 2 months of up and down, intense life changes. And, now here we are, 2 years, a little past 2 years out. And it just seems like I'm living just such a completely different life. And sometimes it's like I think back and I'm like, that life seems like it was like decades ago, right? Like I can hardly even remember what that was like sometimes. But at the same time, it's like, I can't believe it was that long ago. It seems like just
yeah.
yesterday.
Well,
And
and
it's
I
just
think
such a weird dynamic.
yeah, and I think one thing that people will really be interested to know is you had a lot on your shoulders, right? Going through that. And then you had tough decisions to make. You just found out that you were pregnant not that long before. You also have a small child. And so many people, when they lose their spouse, they just feel like it's hopeless. Like there's no point in going on. They can't
Mhm.
breathe. They're just drowning in their grief. And we know everybody's timeline with grief is different. But for you, where was the point where you felt like, okay, it's not going to be like this every day, and maybe I can have hope again for the future, and maybe I can start to rebuild my dreams and what I really see for my future? What was that like for you?
Yeah. I think in those first few days and weeks, it is just such a massive grief. And, when I put all those things together, we had the death. We moved like a month, not even a month later, and that was in progress, prior, but still had to go forward with that move. I lost my job the first day back, because of COVID, and said I was in the social services field. And just the way that all went down, I had worked there for 10 years and, no manager there even mentioned Jake's passing. And it's just beyond how that can even, this is my first day back, and then getting let go because the program I ran because of COVID just it wasn't no longer feasible. It was a school-based program, but for no one there to even mention that when you go back to get let go is just crazy.
That's
Um,
crushing.
it really is, and then living in that COVID world, still post loss, and that isolation was really, really draining. And then having the baby. So basically, I say all of that to say that at the time, I really had to kind of make a decision to really deal with all of the task oriented things that needed to get done. And that's my personality. I'm a very task list type of person. So that came easy for me. And it's almost like I had to split my brain and say like the emotional part is going to be over here. And for now, like to get through these next few days, like I have to just focus on the daily tasks, right? And that for me was comforting in a way, because and when you wake up and your whole world is different and there's a huge hole and a huge loss, to have something, some goal or something to do was helpful for me, personally. And that's kind of where I focused those, that next month or two, was wrapping up the bank accounts, the passwords, the funeral, the insurance, the car, that kind of stuff, that really practical stuff is where I just poured what energy I had into that, until I got to a place where I felt like the practical things are taken care of. I can breathe for a second, and now I can start dealing with the emotional side of it.
Yeah, it's almost like we go into crisis management mode of,
Yeah.
we know what has to be done. Here's all the to-dos. Let's check everything off the box. And
Right.
I know for me, I had some coworkers tell me the same thing, like, well, we can tell you've just got a checklist in your head and you're going down it. But, you almost have to not give yourself a choice. And it's not that you don't cry or you don't still have those overwhelming moments, but in order to survive, especially with kids or other family members that depend on you, that
Right.
you've got to just get some things done. And then it's almost like maybe you have this moment where things quiet down a little bit and people stop checking on you as much and people aren't really sending you as many messages, and it slowly kind of seeps back in. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, for sure. And that support is so great. And I'm lucky to have had a lot of great support and family and friends. And I really was, I know that not everyone has that. And I know that must just add to the difficulty of someone's grief. And but there does come a point where that stops and slows down, and you still have to get up every day, and you still have to make the meals, and it's not a choice when you have such young kids to not, you just have to. But I really remember the people who would send texts 3-4 months later, hey, just checking on you, or just wanted to say hi. And I have, a handful of great friends who did that and didn't ever require a response back. And I think that's the key, and they kept doing it. And so even if I didn't ever, say something back or whatever, and that is helpful. And that's what I remember a lot about that time is those few people who really did continue to check in and still do. And yeah, we do go to this kind of numb place to just get through the day. And we do have those breakdowns. For me, it was like nighttime, because I finally had a moment without the kids. And driving, I don't know what it was about driving, but I could just kind of space out for a minute, which probably isn't the safest, but I mean, I definitely did it. Like I would miss, I've lived in this town my whole life, but I would miss, basic turns. And it's just like, I think because I knew the kids were buckled, contained, safe, and I could just kind of zone. So I had that kind of thing going. And those are the two things I remember, is like nighttime and driving were kind of my two little areas to just kind of start dealing emotionally.
Yeah, I think nighttime's a big one for people. And I've been reading this book, I think it's called The Grieving Brain, that just talks about how one of the reasons why grief is so hard is because your brain has patterns. How many days, nights, weeks, years did you go to bed and that person was beside you? And so now you have to get through more days, weeks, months, years of that person not beside you for it to feel like a new pattern and a new habit.
Yeah.
And I think you also hit on something that, I would love for people who support those who are grieving to really grasp, is the loving that person without expectation. And I did have, a handful of people that, constantly sent messages, cards, let me know that they cared. And
Yeah.
months later, I would look up like, I haven't even told these people thank you, or I got this,
Right.
and they just kept sending it, kept sending it, kept sending it. And so I
Yeah.
finally was able to go back at some point and tell them, like, you have no
Yeah.
idea what that meant for me, for
Yeah.
you to just keep doing it without a response. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so tell us now that had that experience, you went through those stages or through that process of grieving. Then
Yeah.
tell us what's happened now over the past, it's been
Yeah.
what, about 2 years, just over
Yeah.
2 years?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think before I got all off track, one of your questions was, what was there a turning point for you, or what did that look like? And for me, that was I was able to hold like a celebration of life event a year later. So that was in August of 2021. And that was what Jake had wanted. And, when we had the funeral, that was in no way healing to me. I don't remember it. I'm going to be honest with you. I spoke there, and I have hardly any memory of that day. And so that in no way was closure or healing, to me. And then during that, with COVID and having to have it limited was just another roadblock. So the celebration event was awesome. And we had, no restrictions. He has a big family. So, all his family, all of our friends, he loves beer. So we had a ton of like all his favorite beers and, little write-ups, and he did beer reviews. So like we printed those. It was just a cool event. I was super happy with how it came together, photo album, slideshow, like yard games, pretty setting. It was really cool. The kids were there. And after that event, I felt like I could like take a deep breath and kind of let some of that go. As much as I hate to say that phrase, like let things go, because you don't really ever let things go. You don't ever get over this loss of your spouse. You never completely heal. It's always going to be like an open wound that is easily triggered. It's not going to go away. And there's always going to be times where it's like that pain is very fresh and raw and all consuming. But for me, I feel like I found what does happen is that you just learn to live with it and live around it. And I feel like you learn to adapt to it. And like you recognize, I recognize that it will always be there, and it's always going to be a part of me and my story and my life. And I will, at this point, it's like learning to carry that and also know the reality is that life keeps going, right? It keeps going, and it's now, and it's here, and it's for the living. And to be able to come to a place where you can recognize and have experiences where you realize like this intense grief and sadness goes side by side with intense joy, and like learning to live with those two contradictory emotions or feelings is really hard, but also knowing and accepting that that's just how it's going to be is allows me to move forward. And with one of those things being moving forward with dating and in life. So I feel like after that event, that's what I walked away with. And I just feel like that was my turning point, having completed that and done that. And I felt like it was a good, felt like I could breathe a little better.
Good. Like maybe the air was lighter around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sounds like such a creative and nice experience on the celebration of life. I'm glad you did that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I think it's hard for people when they're in those first few weeks and months. It's just crushing every day.
Oh,
And
yeah.
people always want to know, well, do you ever get over grief? But I think the way you described it was really beautiful, because it's hard to tell people like, well, you're always going to have grief around, but you're not always going to feel the way that you feel right now. It's not going to
Yeah.
be maybe as raw or as frequent as it does. But I think
Mhm.
you listed that out very well, that you have almost these these bittersweet moments, right? As
Yeah.
your kids have milestones and they start kindergarten and they go off to college and get married, you're always going to have that thought in the back of your mind, like, oh, I wish their dad was here and that he could see that, in
Yeah.
this moment.
Yeah.
But I love the way that you described that.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah, that was, I guess that's kind of how I, figured like I gave myself permission to kind of move forward and that kind of stuff. And the dating world, right? Like crazy. Can we just acknowledge that for a second? Like,
Okay. Did you do the dating apps? I gotta know.
yes. And if you ever want a confidence boost, I would say that's the way to go, like just straight off, even if you're not ever gonna like, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe
Yes,
like,
yes.
if you ever are feeling really down, just put a picture up and just watch the messages roll in for like 10 minutes and then delete it and then you're good to go. No, but I started dating him in 2013, and then to date again now, it's like it's all changed. It's just changed. Yeah, so that took a huge like leap of faith, and I felt like nervous, like actually when I hit like the submit button on like my profile, right? And I'm like, someone is gonna see this that knows me. First of all,
Right.
and who's gonna like judge, right? Because now we
Yeah.
have that you're not grieving long enough or whatever that looks like. So that's always in your head. For me, it was anyway. It's like, so who's going to be judging me secretly from behind a corner or screen? But also, it's just like, oh man, like it does take a lot. It took a lot for me to like make that step forward, because especially the road that like widows are on and how much our life has changed. It was like, what do I even put in the profile? Like, widow, 3 kids, one's a baby, no job. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, it can
Yeah.
be like a real like self-esteem, like, because I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to talk to someone, the first thing I'm going to say is like, what do you do for a living? Right? Those are basic, like, get to know you questions. And so I was just like, I just don't know if I can, that's my profile. Right. So it's kind of like, oh, but I don't know. So I kind of just made it like, you know what, it's just going to just be fun. We're just going to see where it goes. And I had a few dates that went well. I really don't have any like crazy dating stories, which is nice because I know they're out there. But I ended up going on a date and with my boyfriend now, and we both, we're kind of in the same spot. Like, this is just going to be fun, like whatever. And now it's been a year. So, things like that just happen. And it's almost like when you don't think about it so much and just kind of go into that as like just going to be open to like what life has around the corner. You never know, I guess, but the first step is putting yourself out there and having that kind of attitude to just see where it goes. I guess that was what was helpful for me, and now a year later, and yeah, and it might not look the way that you think it will look. And I think it's really hard not to compare sometimes, especially if you're coming from a marriage or a relationship where things were, pretty easy and pretty, I know not all relationships are that way, but when you had one that was, it's hard not to compare. And I think it's different going into dating again because we have this baggage now, and so does everyone else though, by the way, especially adults our age, right? And that's something different too, because when you're young dating, 20s, early 20s, not a lot of people have a bunch of baggage back then. They're, for the most part, haven't been divorced or kids, and that all creates baggage. And when you're older, people have it. And it's just like finding the right person who will accept, your baggage. And then, I think that's the most important. And I've been really lucky because widows do come with a different set of baggage than, a divorce, for example. Like, I'm still very much in touch with Jake's family, and his parents come to visit quite often, and having someone who's willing to meet them and get to kind of know them when there is this big kind of hole and grief of now, Jake's family and what that looks like for them. and not only meet and be willing to kind of meet us where we're at, I think is really important. And that's something to keep in mind, that it's, it's not, if there's children involved, it's 24/7. It's not a every other weekend,
Right.
kind of situation, which is more typical. And
Yeah. So I
it's
have
just,
so many questions about dating that I want to ask you
okay,
that I know
okay, go.
people will have. Okay, so first of all, did you tell your family or your late husband's family before you decided to put yourself out there on the dating app world, or did you think I'll just wait until I find someone?
Yeah. So I told my mom, because we're pretty close, my sister, and maybe like 2 or 3 like close friends, that I was going to do it. And like, how do I do it? Like, what advice do you have? Like my friends, who are still single, like what do I do? What ones do I use? What do I not use? Like, so I definitely talked, with them about it, but I did not put it out, in the open, really. I didn't. And as far as Jake's parents go, I told them, I mentioned that they come to visit, quite often. So I told them at one of those visits, when I thought, like, after, the kids have met him, and I realized that this was not just going to be a fun little fling. I didn't want it to come up from one of the kids, like, oh, talking about this person, right? And then have it kind of be an awkward situation. So I did tell them prior to their visit one time, and it's like, I just wanted to, and I told them over text, because I felt like it would give them time to think about it and respond when they were ready to. And everyone's different, and your people, but I just felt, for me, that was the best way to go, because it's hard to respond sometimes in the moment, especially with a topic like that. And so I felt like, I'm going to put it out there and give them time to breathe and process, and they can get back to me when they can. And that sounds easy, but it wasn't. I was like shaking, like, sending that message. It brings up a lot of emotion. It really does. I remember it. Like, I was shaky, and I was like nervous about it. And, their response was what I expected. Like, obviously we knew this, you would date at some point. We're, happy for you, but you're right. It does bring up a lot of different emotion, and it just kind of left it at that. So for me, that worked really well, but I thought it was important to say something before they heard it from someone else.
Yeah, no, that's good that they were supportive, although they're still being honest. I know, I'm sure that would be hard. I've not lost a child, and I can't really imagine what all that would feel like, but I'm sure that would be really hard.
Yeah.
Did you have anyone around you that became critical of you? Like, oh, how could you do that if you loved Jake? Or you're doing this too fast. You're just lonely. Did you have any of that negative feedback around you?
Not to my face.
Well, that's good, I guess, unless it was a big social media post or something,
No,
but
no, I really didn't come across any negative like that. And I'm just living in reality. I'm sure that it was said. I'm sure it was. It just is how people are. But I didn't have to encounter it personally, or read about it, or or hear about it. So that's good, because at the end of the day, unless you've been in someone's position, you just don't know. And yeah, I think it's a touchy subject, and it's a touchy world. And if you can just be as transparent about it as you can, that's all you can do.
yeah, well, and I think people view it as either or. Either you love
Mm-hmm.
this person or you love that person, and there's no way to incorporate both. But for
Yeah.
me, as someone I talked to earlier said, it's like having kids. You have your first kid and you think, I could never love anyone as much as I love this child. And then your
Yeah.
second child comes along and you're like, wow, I can love both of them the same. And I didn't love the first one any less. My heart just grew a little bit bigger. So
Yeah.
I think that's good for people to hear. So,
Mhm.
all right, your now boyfriend,
Mhm.
he sees your profile and he's like,
Yeah.
wow, this girl's really beautiful, I'm sure is what he
I
thought.
mean,
But,
definitely. I'll stop the top. No.
and then Did he have any reservations about you being a widow, or to him was that just like, well, it is what it is, and I'm just jumping in to see what's going to happen?
Yeah, he didn't. He didn't. He was very much, that's your story, and that's, your life and how it happened. And he was definitely not at all, scared or nervous of what that looked like, or, it's like, I have my kids all the time, and he was like, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, of course you do. Like, very understanding of that situation, which again, I know not everyone is, and I know that that can bring a lot of, conflict and challenges to relationships. But, I think for the most part, he has been very understanding and very, welcoming of kind of this strange lifestyle or family circle or dynamic, about how things are. And yeah, I think that that's important when you find someone who can, handle that. That's something that you need to acknowledge and see it for what it is, because
Mhm.
that means a lot when someone can do that,
Yeah.
and see pictures up and what that looks like. And have my kids say, oh, I miss my daddy, and respond to that appropriately is a big thing.
Oh, that's awesome. And so, have you felt awkward at all about, maybe any pictures or any, maybe if at a holiday you kind of incorporate their dad or any of that, have you struggled or kind of felt awkward at any point about any of
Mhm.
those things?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think it's always kind of an internal struggle. I still have pictures up, and I always will have pictures up. I did, move some of the, like, the bigger ones, to just different areas. But, I again, he is very much Jake is very much still a part of my life. He always will be. So, my kid's dad, and there's always going to be pictures and reference and that kind of stuff. But it is, from a dating standpoint, and I know it's not an ex, and that's what the difference is, right? It's not an ex. But in our culture, you
Mhm.
don't have things up of your ex, right? Like, and so it's kind of this, like, I wonder if I should leave that up, or should I take it down? And, so you do question that. And I think that that's probably pretty normal to think about kind of that stuff, and how that feels, and also like how that feels, to your new person too.
Mhm.
And I think there can be a middle ground, and finding that space where everyone's comfortable. But it takes a difficult conversation to do that, and that can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the ways I've thought about it best, for my experience was I did date someone for a period of time, and for the most part, I mean, 99% super supportive, even went with me on Nathan's birthday to the gravesite, and just amazing understanding and support. And I think maybe in a moment of just struggling, looked at me and said, how could I ever measure up or compete with, someone that you spent 20 years with? And, they said, I realize I'm not in competition with them, but in
Right.
those moments of insecurity I'm not sure that I can measure up. I think, well, that could be in the back of somebody's mind. And I hadn't really thought about it that way,
Yeah.
but I know for sure it would take a very special person to be
Mhm.
understanding and, to your point, accept, that person's side of the family as a concrete part of your family now, and just all of those little memories that reiterate that that person was such a big part of your life.
Yeah, and I think that it is. I'm sure that he does have those moments too, and we're all human, and it is just such a different dynamic, to work through. And I wish that our culture, we kind of brought up this point a little bit earlier, like our culture is sometimes so ill-equipped to deal with just death in general, and people don't know what to say, and people don't know what to do, and people don't know how to react. And I one of my goals, or what I would really like to see at some point, is just a shift in our culture to understanding or accepting that death is part of life, and how to be more supportive and what that looks like, because we're not taught, at least in my area and cult, small community, you're just not. And it's almost one of those things that the culture kind of explicitly kind of says, like, oh, well, now he's died, we're not going to bring that up anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really not how it works. Like, please do bring it up. And I think people feel so uncomfortable that they're going to make you sad or upset or whatever. And it's like, well, I'm already sad and upset about, like, nothing you say is going to trigger me off the wall. Like, so just that acknowledgement, I think, is really important, especially for younger generations and younger widows. And that's something I would really like to see change just in our broader culture, is just some more understanding and acceptance and awareness. And I think with social media, we have a great platform to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so much of it is just education. You have people that genuinely want to help you. And then you have the widow that doesn't want to accept help and, is probably going to burn herself into the ground before she asks for help. So you've got kind of these conflicting dynamics. And then, you have the same conflicting dynamic of, I don't want to ask you, about your person because that might make you cry and be sad. And you're just wishing that somebody would bring them up in normal conversation. So I think there's a lot we can do to bridge that gap between the people who support someone who's grieving and someone who is grieving. And I wish I could remember, I think I saw on TikTok that somebody said, it's like culturally, we live our life with our back towards death and grief. And until it comes around and smacks us in the face, we don't like talking about it. We don't like thinking about it. And I mean, I remember in the workplace, to the point of your managers not bringing that up. I mean, I remember, like, I didn't know what to say to people other than I'm sorry. And you kind of think, well, they're going to be sad for a little while, but then, probably in a couple weeks or a month, maybe they're better. They're back to normal. And you just have no idea the depths that it changes our identity, that it changes, especially a spouse, when you lose a spouse, everything that you do on a daily basis, you just, unless you've gone through it or been really close to someone who's gone through it, I think you can't understand the magnitude of how much that changes you as a person. And I wish that we could help people understand that better.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. Yeah.
All right. Well, Shyla, thank you so much for joining me today. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave people with, whether it was something that helped you or a word of encouragement or something that you really would want people to know?
I think that it is important to recognize, your grief and your emotions and the massive shift and change in your life that happens when you lose someone, and that is all valid, and it really is. But I also think it's okay to know that there is a point where you can learn to live with both an intense, sadness and loss, and also some joy and happiness too. And I think that they can live side by side, and I think that brings some hope, or I hope it does.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so proud of you for putting yourself out there and deciding that you're going to live life and get out of bed every day and make things happen. It's something a lot of people struggle with, but you've done it in a very beautiful way. So thank you again for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the Brave Widow podcast. I would love to help you take your next step, whether that's healing your heart, finding hope, or achieving your dreams for the future. Do you need a safe space to connect with other like-minded widows? Do you wish you had how-tos for getting through the next steps in your journey, organizing your life, or moving through grief? What about live calls where you get answers to your burning questions? The Brave Widow membership community is just what you need. Inside, you'll find courses to help guide you, a community of other widows to connect with, live coaching and Q&A calls, and small group coaching where you can work on what matters most to you. Learn how to heal your heart, find hope, reclaim joy, and dream again for the future. It is possible. Head on over to bravewidow.com to learn more.